Did you ever have one of those trips that you've planned out meticulously for months and been so excited about going on, and you have all of these wonderful things planned, and when you get there, nothing goes the way that you had expected, but because you took the time to take a nice deep breath and just go with the flow, that the trip actually turned out probably better? Maybe that's just me. That was my trip to Scotland. So if you're new to the channel here, my name is Tim. I am a retired educator living in Chattanooga, and this channel is a hodgepodge of things about what it's like to be retired. And if you have been here for a while, then you probably are fully aware that I have been planning a trip to Scotland. I have a trip coming up in March with my 3 daughters and their families, and the nephew and his partner, and we're going to be going over to Scotland and spending about 9 days. And I didn't want to get in 2 van loads full of people and not know what to expect. So I took a quick trip to Scotland myself and went through where I thought we would want to be going. And I'm going to take the next 2 or 3 videos to talk about that trip and show you a little bit about where I was. I thought that I could just video everything while I was there, use my little DJI Pocket 2 and tell a story and, get B-roll. And it turns out that when I got done and I was looking at everything I'd done, none of it made any sense. And so I thought, well, I'll go home and I'll sit down in front of a camera. I'll talk about a few things. Then I'll share some of the footage and I'll talk about it a little more and I'll share some more footage. So that's kind of the way this is going to roll out. And this first video, it's part 1 of 3. I'm going to take you through my trip to Dunoon, and then from Dunoon up to Fort William, and Fort William to Glenfinnan. We'll get that far. That was the first 2 days. And again, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that my family and I used to live in Dunoon back in the fall of 91, the spring of 92. We were at Dunoon as a Christian Servicemen Center director, and it was this little sleepy kind of town filled with American Navy people because there was a submarine tender base there. And we went and we ministered to those troops and their families for about 6 months until the base closed. And my kids were young. They don't really remember a lot about it. And their kids are older. And so one of the things that I wanted to do in this trip was to start in Dunoon and just look around, see where we lived, look at the town a little bit. It's quite different now that the American military is gone. And so we're going to take a little time, and we're going to work our way through Dunoon. And I will just remind you that, the big thing for me in Dunoon was Anselmo's Fish and Chips, and I did get to go there, so you'll see that in this part of the video. Now I'm on the ferry right now over to Dunoon. I think it comes in at Hunter's Key rather than the main pier. I could be wrong about that. But let's take a look around. One of the reasons Dunoon has such a special place for us is that we lived here for 6 months. Back when my children were small, we packed up everything. You talk about minimalism. We sold all the furniture. We sold most of my library. We got down to just, kitchen items, clothing. I think we had about 55 small boxes. A few of them weren't so small. We were able to ship UPS to an APO box. So it was like shipping it to an American address. And so that's what we arrived with, 55 small boxes you could just pick up and carry, with clothes and toys for the kids and books for my library to study because I was going to be preaching, and a lot of other things. And so it was just, I don't know, it just captivated me with its small town atmosphere, its laid back lifestyle, having Navy personnel and family members in and out of our house all day, every day. Several of them who paid rent to live in the house. Just a lot of memories, the vast majority of them good. There are a few. And so rather than coming in at the Dunoon Pier, which will lead me right downtown, I'm coming in at Hunter's Key, which is down the road a little ways. And so I'm going to take that road down to Dunoon to start with. I'll make my way back to Hunter's Key. But the reason that I'm going to make it down there is because I believe that the Anselmo's Fish and Chip Shop is open, and I don't want to miss it. Okay, I got here a little bit after 12, and Anselmo's opens at 12. So I had to wait for the fish to be cooked. And so it's going to be super hot, and it should be super good. One major change, though, it used to be that everything was just wrapped in newsprint, and they changed that, I think, at some point when they decided that ink was probably not good for us. But now, instead of just spreading it out in newsprint, they actually have it in a fish and chips container. But this is the magic right here. I should point out that I got the small fish and chips because the large fish and chips has 2 pieces of fish like that. But it is, like I said, it is super, super hot. I'm probably going to regret this, but let's try it out. Oh, man. That brings back so many memories. When we lived here, we fed servicemen pretty much every night of the week at our house. And so it wasn't unusual to have 10 or 12 at least for dinner. But on Thursdays, that was our night out of the kitchen and our night off. And so we would come to Anselmo's and pick up fish and chips and take it home and eat fish and chips every Thursday night. Man, does that bring back some memories. One of the main reasons we're coming back to Dunoon with my family in March is to take my kids around to places that they probably don't remember much. And this building behind me is probably the main one. This was the house we lived in. It was known as the Christian Serviceman Center, and this is the exterior door, kitchen window, and where our kitchen table was over on the end. And then up here on top, this large area right here was sort of a meeting hall where we would have Bible studies on Wednesdays. And then over on the other side, my fingers are right, over on the other side, we had some bedrooms where people rented out and lived. Yeah, we had good times here. I am not going to walk on their property, obviously, but this is leading around toward the front of the house, sort of a nice gravel driveway. The living room was here on this end, and bedrooms on the other side, on the other end. I don't know if we can see it down here or not, but a pretty large yard area. Maybe I can see it when I get down here. A pretty large yard area here that leads back up to the house. And I just have to say that this is probably just the perfect spot for this place to be. Down here at the bottom of the road, I'll drive back down there where I can get a picture of it. But this is the pier that went out to the boats that would take the sailors out to the submarine tender. And they would come off the submarine tender walk that pier, and then walk up this road here to get to us. And our house was rarely ever empty. When you think that we were just a walk down the hill to this view every single day, I am still amazed. The thing about this dock, when the sailors would come in and it's raining heavily, in Scotland, a lot of times it can actually rain sideways. The wind is so strong. And so they would come to the serviceman center and they would be wet only on one side, and on the other side they'd be completely dry. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. I'm going to take a quick walk down High Street. For the most part, Dunoon has not changed a whole lot. I'm sure there are different storefronts than what there used to be, and there are a few empty spots that used to be full, because it was a thriving little place when the Navy was here. But the look and feel of the place hasn't really changed at all. Today is just kind of a stopping point on this trip, and I plan on spending a couple hours here, and that's about what I've spent. So it's time to head on up to Fort William and see what we can see before it gets dark. Now, I didn't take any pictures in Dunoon. It wasn't really, that wasn't on my agenda. I basically took some video. I took a few pictures with my phone, sent them back to my girls so they could kind of see where I was and what was going on, but nothing that I was going to post in this video. But my goal was to see, where can we go after Dunoon? Can we get to Fort William on the same day? That's where we have our first hotel. How long will that take? And where can we stop? And I stopped at a couple of places that I was not familiar with, and they turned out to be a bust. So I'm not going to talk about those. But there are a couple of places along the way between Dunoon and Fort William that we will get out and look around. But I did get to Fort William that night. I got there before dark. That was my goal. And so the next day when I got up, I did a couple of things. So the first thing was I went over to a site that I had seen on YouTube that a lot of photographers have gone to. I guess it's kind of like an Instagrammable spot, maybe, to a place called the Old Man of Kyle. It's spelled C-A-O-L, and I wasn't really sure how to pronounce that until I saw the English subtitle on the street signs, and it is Kyle, the Old Boat of Kyle. And it is a shipwreck there, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the story about the shipwreck, but I did want to go and take pictures of that because I just, those kinds of things fascinate me, and I like the old distressed metal and the rust and all of the growth that's there. Those things are just, I don't know, they have a certain beauty to them in photography. Now, I will say that anything that I could do wrong on that photo shoot, I did wrong. What I had wanted to do, and this will get a little photographically challenging for a moment, but bear with me. What I wanted to do was set my camera up to take 3 what they call exposure brackets. So when you set your camera up to take a picture at the right light, then you take another picture that's 2 stops darker than that, and another picture that's 2 stops brighter than that. So the darker one brings down all the bright spot in the photo, and the lighter one brings up all the shadowy spots. And when you blend those together in a bracketed sort of HDR kind of way in Photoshop, everything sort of evens itself out and you get a really nice looking shot. That was my goal. But I'm still a little unfamiliar with some of the menus in the Canon R6 Mark II because I just don't change them often enough. And instead of setting up exposure bracketing, I set up focus bracketing. And in focus bracketing, the camera will take certain pictures, a certain number of pictures at different distances of focus and blend them all together so that you get one picture that's in focus. And then it discards all of the original pictures you took and just leaves you with this one image that's already edited in camera, and makes it really hard to work with when you get it in Photoshop or into Lightroom. And I knew when I was there, I knew something wasn't going right. I could not for the life of me figure out what I did wrong. But I came away with a few pictures, and I'll throw them up here. They didn't turn out too bad. And from there, I was on my way to between Fort William and Maleg. I think it's pronounced Maleg. Maleg? Anyway, it's where the ferry is. In between there, about halfway, is Glenfinnan. And Glenfinnan is where the Glenfinnan Viaduct is. And if you're not familiar, the Glenfinnan Viaduct is that nice arched, swooping line of the Harry Potter steam train. And it comes around 4 times a day. Twice a day it comes in the direction toward me. And that morning, about 11:50-ish or so, was when it was going to come through. Now, I had been there before. When I went on Rabbi's tours, we went to the Glenfinnan Viaduct Visitor Center. And there is a path up to a lookout from there. But when you look at it, the viaduct is flat. You don't see the curve. It's just flat. It was disappointing because I just assumed I was going to the other location. So I did a little research, and I found out that there was a path about a third of a mile further down the road at the Glenfinnan train station, where this train actually stops. And there is a walking path up the hill. And so I decided to go there and see what it was like. So on the way there, I passed this really, really beautiful church. I don't remember the name of it. I'll try to put it up on the screen. I'll look it up and put it up on the screen. But I got a couple of pictures of that at least, and I'll put them up here as well while I'm talking. And then I took that path up to the hilltop overlooking the viaduct. So I had this beautiful swooping line of the viaduct sort of curving toward me. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking, this still doesn't look right. There's something about this that isn't what I was expecting. And I realized that, and it was too late to change my location, which was fine. But I realized that the trail continues around and then back down into the valley and comes out on the other side of the visitor center. So I'm on the west side, and the trail comes around and exits out on the east side, and the visitor center is in the middle. And if you go up that direction, the opposite direction from where I was, that's when you get to what I would call the iconic viewpoint that you see so many times in the movies and in pictures that you see. And so I know that's where we want to go the next time. We want to go the other direction. So, that's what this trip was all about, was just kind of figuring out where I am, where I need to be, can we park there, and all those kinds of things. So that was the extent of my first day getting to Dunoon, and then getting to Fort William and over to the ferry. And then on the second part, we'll look at the Isle of Skye in the next video. I appreciate you hanging around. We'll see you next time.
Okay, that was definitely worth the wait in the rain, climbing up hills both ways, in the mud, over rocks, trying to keep my camera dry. That was worth it.